I just want you to take a look at the language of opposition. Because if their principle is that the person's racism, homophobia, or extremism makes their death a fair game for the most vulgar and dehumanizing forms of mockery, then they need to defend that principle consistently. I want to ask, would they say the same thing about the death of a Palestinians who held sexist, extremist, or homophobic views on their daily basis and actually created a culture behind it? This is exactly why this call-outs becomes incoherent, because when these people rely on memification, the shock value, and the vulgarity of it, instead of creating a clear principle call-out, then they eventually create contradictions that they cannot answer. They want to say that Charlie Kirk's harmful politics, justified dehumanizing his death, but they don't want the same logic applied to other marginalized or politically sympathetic groups whose members may also hold the same harmful views. We say that someone dying in an unjustifiable way is something that should remain usually crucial in front of our eyes. So the trend that is happening right now is actually harmful because it's not just used by the same people that we ought to view. For example, we have the same Junko Furuta memes in response to this memification of Charlie Kirk. We also had the corned beef memification of the right-wing politics within the Philippines. In itself, memification is something that's harmful when you enter it within the political ground, because we say that political ground requires cohesion, and the prerequisite for a strong call-out is actually precision. So you need to know what exactly you are condemning. You are why is it wrong in the first place? What standard you are applying across cases? Those conversations will always be trickled down. And they responded by saying that if people view this as a meme, that's okay. But the problem is those memes actually diversifies. Those memes actually populate the discussion about Charlie Kirk. When you search Charlie Kirk in TikTok, the first thing that you will view is this is the meme about Charlie Kirk and not about the atrocities that he did. So on the comparative, you don't really get any margin of change at all. In fact, you make it messier and much more harder to respond to the strategy that you ought to do. So before anything else, I want to deal with whether the strategy actually works on its own terms, because even if they say that memification of Charlie Kirk is meant to expose his racism, homophobia, and extremism, the question is whether it actually persuades anyone, educates anyone, especially on the middle wing or low, those undecided people who doesn't really know Charlie Kirk. Proposition simply tells you no, because the strategy has not actually changed anything. In fact, Charlie Kirk remains politically relevant right now. His supporters still defend him. His ideology is still represented among other people. You can see Donald Trump, for example, or maybe other extremist people. You can see Andrew Tate, for instance. So if the goal of memification was to weaken his movement, I think it's just an action that is already did by those people who already hate this movement in the first place. So if you say that it makes people more woke, makes people more appealing, we say that it doesn't, because if you're an undecided people or someone who doesn't know Charlie Kirk, you see someone making fun of someone's death, would you really listen to what they're saying? I don't think you will. So that's why we point out that memification is a poison that changes atrocity from something people are supposed to condemn into something that they're invited to play with. And this leads me to question their effectivity, because the problem with immature call-out is that they attack the wrong thing. For example, in their POI, if a rape victim calls out rapists by mocking them for being fat, ugly, physically disgusting, what are you going to do if that specific person is a mug god, for example, he looks like Chico Lachowski, for example. So all of this confusion will happen if you don't have that precision that we talk about, which will only happen, by the way, if you, instead of memifying him, you at least call him out and say that, even if you say that he's a martyr, actually this is the atrocity that he did, blah, blah, blah. Because the memes that actually happen doesn't actually call out his mistakes. You just turn Iron Man into the face of Charlie Kirk. Actually, it's also used as a mimetic warfare by those CIA. It's a way for you to desensitize whatever happened, whatever atrocities he did, into a meme. So in itself, it's creating a pawn for this right-wing conventionalist propaganda. So at that point, you don't get any margin of change at all. And I also want to note that the legitimate call-outs against Charlie Kirks are now dragged into the mud within the present time, because a lot of people joining memification do not actually care about accountability, the communities he harmed, or the political critique that should be made against him, because those people are just actually 14 years old in TikTok. They're only there for vulgarity and the chance to turn someone's death into a cheap internet performance. A lot of kids posting TikToks do not not even know what Charlie Kirk actually did, what his politics were, or why people had legitimate reason to criticize him in the first place. But even if they do, let's say like you see this meme about Charlie Kirk as a like a mother from the Philippines, like you don't know anything about him. If you see someone like making fun of Charlie Kirk and you search up the atrocities that he did, I don't think you will still agree with the ideas that this memification is good in itself. In fact, you like create a bad image for the people that actually dislike this propaganda. So in itself, you also weaken your own view. It's harder for you to create any margin of change if you look like a joke, if you look like someone who radicalizes things. I don't think it creates anything at all. But for that, NEPY. Three.
Yeah, so are all memes in the nature of insults and in the nature of mockery?
I mean, it doesn't matter if it's for the insult or it's for the mockery, because the thing is, the specific context that we are talking about Charlie Kirk, all of the memes about him are just about for entertainment. Like, you don't really see any call out about Charlie Kirk. And even if it is for call out, I already talked about why those people who view this are those same individuals who already hate Charlie Kirk within the radical forms of left-wing group bases. So in those left-wing group bases, by the way, this also leads you to fragmentation, because again, you can already see a lot of individuals who hate Charlie Kirk, but suddenly, say that, I think we are overstepping. I think this is too much. This is why there's a lot of fragmentation. Right after his death, you even called out Dean Winchester, for example, for not attacking Charlie Kirk or making fun of him. So this leads to a disastrous form. So in itself, if you're already in the minority, if you're already in the left-wing propaganda who doesn't have that much people to back on with, this fragmentation in itself is harmful. So we say that this memification failed both as communication and as a political strategy. It also harms the left-wing propaganda that you need to prosper. It harms your own group, and it fails in itself. That's why the call-outs becomes weaker, not stronger. It loses its educational function. That's not the purpose of communication at all.